So this is going to be our last session in the book of John. We're going to study the book of John chapter 21. Last week we studied Thomas, who doubted Jesus' resurrection until he saw Jesus firsthand. And Thomas also participated in the second of Jesus' appearances, at least in the book of John, to all the disciples in the upper room. And then this time that Jesus is going to appear to them by the Sea of Galilee. And in this last appearance that John recorded, Jesus dealt with Peter for his denials, and we'll get to that. And I think we're going to find that Jesus was very tender with Peter. He was not harsh at all. And in this story, it's the last one John recorded in his gospel, and none of the other gospel writers recorded it, which is interesting. And the commentators, so the Bible scholars that write commentaries on John, they call this John's epilogue to his writing. And so he's kind of wrapping up his whole writing with Jesus' commissioning of Peter, and John is revealed in this one as the beloved disciple. It's very clear from this chapter that the writer of the book of John was John, even though his name is never said in the whole book. So let's start off by reading. It's kind of a long passage. It's John 21, verses 1 to 14. Gary, are you ready to read that?
I am.
Okay.
After this, Jesus revealed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias, and he revealed himself in this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and two others of his disciples were together. Simon Peter said to them, I am going fishing. They said to him, We will go with you. They went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Just as day was breaking, Jesus stood on the shore, yet his disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to them, Children, do you have any fish? They answered him, No. He said to them, Cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some. So they cast it, and now they were not able to haul it in because of the quantity of fish. That disciple whom Jesus loved therefore said to Peter, It is the Lord. When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he was stripped for work, and threw himself into the sea. The other disciples came in the boat full of fish, for they were not far off from the land, but about 100 yards off. When they got out on land, they saw a charcoal fire in place with fish laid out on it, and bread. Jesus said to them, Bring some of the fish that you have caught. So Simon Peter went aboard and hauled the net ashore, full of large fish, 153 of them. And although there were so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, Come and have breakfast. Now none of the disciples dare ask him, Who are you? They knew it was the Lord. Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, and so with the fish. This was now the third time that Jesus was revealed to the disciples after he was raised from the dead.
Okay. So this story is not the first time Jesus told them to cast the net on another side of the boat, and they ended up catching a lot of fish after spending a night fishing, not catching anything. I'll read it to you. It's found in Luke chapter 5, verses 4 through 8. And it says, And when he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, Put out into the deep and let down your nets for a catch. And Simon answered, Master, we toiled all night and took nothing. But at your word, I will let down the nets. And when they had done this, they enclosed a large number of fish, and their nets were breaking. They signaled to their partners in the other boat to come and help them, and they came and filled both boats so that they began to sink. But Simon Peter When Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, "Depart from me, for I'm a sinful man, O Lord." That was early in Jesus' time on the earth with his disciples. And then this, what we just read from John chapter 21 happened obviously after Jesus' resurrection. So several days must have passed after Jesus last appeared to the disciples when Thomas was with him in the upper room. And when he appeared from our study last time, the first time he appeared to them was on the day of his resurrection, on the Sunday afternoon after his resurrection. The second time he appeared to them in the upper room was 8 days later. And now this had to be a few days later because they were in Galilee. And it took a while to walk to Galilee, several days, at least 2 or 3 days. And in Matthew 28:7, it's recorded that the angel at the tomb told the women to tell the disciples to go to Galilee and Jesus would meet them there. So the disciples were right where they were supposed to be. They were told by the angel to go to Galilee. To Galilee they went. So we already know from earlier that Peter, Andrew, James, and John were all fishermen by trade. Fishing was what they knew. And so when times were tough and physically working helps to burn off nervous energy and clear the mind. In this case, Peter told the others that he wanted to go fishing. So 6 others joined him. And when they went fishing, they fished at night. I learned from the commentators that this was a common practice at that time.
They did.
They would fish at night so the fish would be fresh in the market the next day. It was a business. So they were in a habit of fishing at night. And this time, again, after working all night, Peter and the other disciples, they came up dry. We would say today that they got skunked. No fish. Then Jesus appeared. I love that. They saw Jesus was on the shore. They saw him, and he called to them. And he was so gentle, tender, and intimate with them. He called them children. He said, "Children." Jesus was resurrected. He paid the price for their sin. They were now God's children, just like we are. So it was a very appropriate for Jesus to address them in this way because they were his children, because Jesus is God. We are God. We belong to God. We are his children. I love this. I love it a lot. And Jesus asked them if they caught any fish. It's interesting to note that and in the Gospels, the disciples never caught any fish without Jesus' help.
That's recorded.
That's recorded, yeah. This time, the first time Jesus said, "Go out fishing and cast your nets out again," and Peter argued with him. This time there was no argument. He said, "Put your nets in on the right side of the boat." They did it without any hesitation. And they caught a large number of fish. And it says they were large fish, and it says there were 153 of them.
I've heard people trying to make some sort of significance at the number. I think they just counted the fish.
They just counted the fish. And I like to fish for bass and catfish and stuff. You get a bunch of large bass, that would have been a lot of weight. If they're a large fish like a big bass, it would have been 5 or 6 pounds each. Added up, that's a lot of weight. That's a lot of weight. John immediately recognized it was Jesus on the shore.
He always did it first. He went into the tomb and said, Peter didn't get it, but John believed.
And I think that John remembered what had happened before when they had been fishing and caught nothing. And God says, Jesus said, put your nets down on and go out and fish. And they caught so many fish. I think John remembered that.
Wait a minute, we've done this before.
Yeah. And Peter was embarrassed because he was stripped of his outer clothing to work. So he put on his clothes and jumped in the water to go to Jesus. And then Jesus had a fire going and had fish and bread cooking. But he says, I need some more fish for you all. You're a bunch of guys who are going to need a lot of fish. So Peter went back and helped with the nets, and they counted them. That's a lot of fish. Now, and I think the fish would have probably brought a lot of money in the market.
Definitely.
And Jesus was providing them in every single way, just like he does for us. He provides for us in every single way. And Jesus invited them to breakfast. Jesus really loved them down to the last detail. They would have been really hungry after working all night. I would have been. And so let's read the next passage. Barbara, could you read John 21:15-19?
When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? He said to him, Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, Feed my lambs. He said to him a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He said to him, Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, Tend my sheep. He said to him the third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, Do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Jesus said to him, Feed my sheep. Truly, truly, I say to you, when you were young, you used to dress yourself and walk wherever you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will dress you and carry you where you will not want to go. This he said to show by what kind of death he was to glorify God. And after saying this, he said to him, Follow me.
After breakfast, Jesus questioned Peter. Jesus was working on restoring Peter after he had denied him. Why did he question him in this way? Remember, Peter had been the one to say that if all the others fall away, I will not. He'd put himself ahead of all the other disciples when he should not have. And God had to break his pride, and he did. And Peter was really, really hurt. Because it says after the cock crowed, he wept bitterly. For a grown man to weep, it was a big deal. And Jesus asked Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?
These other guys.
Yeah, more than these other guys. And Peter answered him, Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. So over the years, there's been a lot of talk about the Greek words that were used in this conversation, where Jesus used the word agape for love, and Peter used the word phileo for love. And according to many Bible teachers, agape refers to a God-type self-sacrificing love, and phileo refers to a brotherly love. However, I read a lot of commentaries in putting this together, and I learned that it's not necessarily the case in the writings that John wrote. In John 3:19 and 12:43, the Greek word agape is used of men loving themselves and their own glory over loving God. And then in John 5:20 and 16:27, the word phileo is used to refer to God's direct love for his son and for his followers. So based upon those instances, the commentators say that we shouldn't make a lot out of the fact that Jesus and Peter use different words that we translate to mean love.
Mm,
But I think there's a little bit of that in there, though. God's challenging Peter, and Peter was being honest with God. Peter, Peter was being honest with God. He didn't say he agape Jesus because he knew what what it meant, and he knew he had not been able to fulfill that, and he still didn't feel that. Now he was completely honest with Jesus.
a little bit more humble.
Yeah. Jesus was directly addressing Peter's basic spiritual problem of pride. And when Peter responded that he did love Jesus, man, yeah. Jesus knew his heart condition. And then Jesus told Peter to feed my lambs. Notice Jesus didn't say, feed your lambs or your sheep. No, he didn't say that. He said, feed my lambs. Who do the lambs belong to?
They're the Lord's.
They belong to him. They belong to Jesus. You know, we don't belong to our pastor or our elders or our deacons. We belong to Jesus. Jesus was commissioning Peter to be a shepherd, not the shepherd, a shepherd of Jesus' people. Peter was to feed and tend Jesus' flock. But he was not to be the only one, but he was commissioning and saying, this is what I want you to do. And I believe that Jesus repeated the question 3 times because Peter had denied Jesus 3 times. And it hurt Peter. It hurt him. And it's part of his humbling. Anybody have any comments on that passage? On that part of it? Okay, in verse 18, Jesus prophesied the way Peter would die. First of all, he said that Peter would die when he was old. This part would have been comforting because it would have meant to Peter that he had time to do God's work. But then Jesus talked about someone else dressing Peter and taking him to some place he didn't want to go. And also include in there the idea of stretching out his hands. It seems that John was indicating that the kind of death Peter would die and that his death would glorify God. And most commentators take this passage to mean that Peter was to die of crucifixion.
And historically,
that's what happened. Now, some traditional stories say that Peter was not willing to die on the cross like Jesus, so he demanded to be crucified upside down. But there's no evidence to support that. But there is good evidence that Peter was crucified just as Jesus predicted. I personally don't believe they would crucify anybody upside down. There's a whole idea about crucifixion is it actually amounts to suffocation over time.
Well, it might be faster if you can't.
And if you're upside down, there's not the pressure on the lungs to breathe. And it would have lasted a lot longer.
I don't know, or took you out faster. I don't know.
I don't think so.
Well, I don't know. Let's not figure it out.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all.
They killed him.
Yeah. And Jesus finally told Peter, no matter what the cost, he was to follow Jesus. And you know what Peter did? All right. Martha, will you read the next one? 20 through 25.
Peter turned and saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following them. the one who also had leaned back against him during the supper and had said, Lord, who is it that is going to betray you? When Jesus saw him, he said to Jesus, Lord, what about this man? And Jesus said to him, if it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? You follow me. And so the saying spread abroad that among the brothers that the disciple was not to die. Yet Jesus did not say to him that he was not to die, but if it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? This is the disciple who is bearing witness about these things and who has written these things, and we know that his testimony is true. Now, there are many other things that Jesus did. Were every one of them to be written, I suppose that the world itself could not contain the books that would be written. Kind of than the University of Nanya.
So it's interesting that while Peter and Jesus were talking, they had walked away from the other disciples so they could talk in private. Well, Jesus didn't want to embarrass Peter and in front of everybody else because Jesus loved him. But then Peter saw John, and again, the old pride thing comes up.
What about him?
What about him? Yeah, actually, Peter and John were pretty close. They did a lot of stuff together. If you remember, it was Peter and John that went with Mary Magdalene, or went when Mary Magdalene came and went to the tomb. It was them that went together. And later in Acts, it was Peter and John who were often together.
They were business partners.
Yeah, they were business partners. But Peter says, what about him? And Jesus basically said, none ya. It's none ya business. What is that to you? He says, if I keep him alive till forever, you don't even worry about it. You need to do your own thing. You do what I told you to do. There's something important and to learn in this is that the natural human tendency is to compare ourselves with others.
Just sweep up your own front yard.
And we all do it. I've caught myself doing it a bunch of times. We are either better or worse than someone else. Who cares? And Jesus is saying that's none of your business. What he wants us to do is he wants us to take care of our relationship with him, do what he tells us to do the things that and even if our spiritual gift is the minor gift of sweeping the foyer at the end of a service or whatever, and that's our spiritual gift, just do it. Are we better or less than anybody else? Doesn't matter. Jesus just wants us to do what he wants us to do. And don't try comparing ourselves to anybody else because that's pride. He's trying to teach us, don't be proud. Just do what I tell you to do. What happens to others is irrelevant to our relationship with Jesus. No matter what happens to other people, our responsibility is to follow him with all our strength. And it's really actually stupid and dangerous spiritually for us to compare ourselves with anyone else. Because each one of us are different. It's like trying to compare a car to a rock in the ocean. They're incomparable. Each one of us God created each one of us so differently. There's no comparison between us. So don't waste our energy on doing that. That's what Jesus is trying to say.
If your attention is worrying about somebody else, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing.
That's right.
You're not obeying. You're following another road.
Right. And what's important for us is just doing what Jesus told us to do and nurturing our relationship with Jesus. But again, we're all different from each other, but we also need each other. So we don't compare ourselves with other people, but we need to be with each other. Just like we need each other in this group. We need to be in a church group. We need to be with other believers who will encourage us and help us along in our spiritual journey. We need each other, but don't compare with, because everybody's on their own journey. Everybody's journey is different. Everybody's our personalities are different. Our life experiences are different.
We have different gifts.
We have different, yeah, it's just like, yeah. But I love what John said. The word was getting around that he was going to live until Jesus came back. Is wait a minute, I'm writing this. I want to dispel that rumor. No, that's not what Jesus is saying. I think part of the reason that John wrote this whole last chapter is because that rumor was going around. It's the only reason he wrote it. And then I like what he says in verse 24. John kind of identified himself as the unnamed disciple that wrote about Jesus. And he says, his testimony is true. Why? He was an eyewitness. John's testimony was true because he was an eyewitness. He was there. He had touched Jesus. He had private conversations with Jesus. He had spent time with Jesus. He was an eyewitness. His testimony was true. He'd been there from the very beginning. I believe that John was one of the disciples of John the Baptist that came and followed Jesus after John the Baptist had said, "There he is."
Yeah, they came and said, "We have found the Messiah."
Mm-hmm. And then I love what he says in verse 25. John admitted that he did not write down everything Jesus did. He certainly didn't. When you read his gospel compared to the other gospels, there's, I don't know, hundreds of miracles and stuff that are recorded. John only recorded a handful. But then he says, if everything was written down about what Jesus did, there's no library on the earth that could hold it. Probably during the period John was with Jesus, nearly every minute Jesus did something noteworthy. After all, Jesus is God. You can't go around with God without terrific things happening all the time.
Yeah, we're going to have a
Can you imagine living day to day with God himself at your side physically? Wow. What a privilege. So yeah, John's testimony was true because he was an eyewitness. And he just wrote down what the Holy Spirit wanted us to know. And there's a lot in our study of John. You know what? I could teach John, finish it with this thing, and I could start right over again and enjoy it again, and do it again and do it again, because I just love the book of John, because there's so much, and every time I study it, I learn something new.
I've never heard anybody say, "Oh, I don't like John." I've never
No.
heard anybody say that.
I hope that you all have enjoyed this study. It's been
very much.
It's been terrific. So
Thank you for all your hard work.
thank you all for participating.
Well, thank you for all the 4 hours time you spent.
You're welcome.